right. Let's. Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I'm going to have to add an audio track to that. I love that rotating thing. But I hope you guys are doing all right this morning. We are starting at 7. Wherever you are, under the sound of this voice, this light is a little hot. Ooh, that's hotter. Let's go to this one and let's back off on a little bit on this. If I can back off a little bit on it. There we are. Yeah, I hope you guys are doing all right this morning. My name is Jamal Thomas. I hope you guys can hear me all right. Let me know if there's any sound difficulties. This is a new mic. I tested it yesterday. It came out okay. But let's get started. I see my guest. He is in the background. I have not had an opportunity to talk to Carl for a very long time, so I'm excited about this conversation. We are joined with the one, the only, the man himself, and a good friend of this show, Carl Jha. If I can get both of these. There we are. How you doing, Carl?
Hi, Jamar. How are you?
I'm doing all right.
I'm glad to see you again. I was worried about you. I haven't heard you for a long time, and it was really good to hear you're back. So
yeah, I fell off a cliff for a while, but I'm okay. I'm back. I'm intact. Things are a little weird, but I'm getting back to normal. No, man, I'm glad to see you, and I'm glad to hear from you, and I'm glad you are doing all right. And just for the audience, just so they know who you are, I'm pretty sure that they do, but in case on some anomalous situation that they don't, we're joined with, I'm sorry, Carl. I've lost a lot of my vision, and so these are now a necessity under certain circumstances. I'm Carl Jha. He's host of Silk and Steel podcast focused on China and surrounding areas or surrounding regions and their history, culture, and their politics. You can follow Carl on Twitter at Carl Jha. You can follow his podcast on Twitter at Steel Silk In, and you can subscribe and support his podcast on patreon.com/silk and steel. Carl, you are the man I want to talk to today. Especially with the news that is kind of bubbling up. And I guess there are a few points. I guess the first one of interest is the blockade. The second one is going to be of Taiwan and the meeting between Taiwan's opposition leader and going to China. But let's get to the blockade first. Does this affect China? And obviously, just in case someone was living under a rock over the weekend, Donald Trump, after failing miserably in his objectives in Iran, effectively losing another war, turns around and without being able to accomplish what he wants militarily, he screams, since you're blockading the Strait of Hormuz, we're also going to blockade it. And that blockade is going to be super swift. And the first thing I thought of was, okay, this sounds very dumb because Iran's strategy and their leverage is blockading the strait. And you are coming in now and blockading the strait. How does this affect, or does this affect China? I mean, China came out with a statement effectively saying, leave us to our devices and do not intrude into our political affairs. Does this affect China in any way?
Well, first of all, Trump carried out a lot of empty threats. He's gonna blockade the blockade. First of all,
right.
How is that gonna be done? Right? I mean, for Iran to blockade the Strait of Hormuz, that's an established fact. They could do it because everything is within their missile range. Now, where is U.S. Navy gonna set up the second blockade line? Because anywhere from the mouth of Persian Gulf all the way to Oman, that's within Iranian missile range. It's
right.
no-go zone for the U.S. Navy. There's a reason the USS Abraham Lincoln, the U.S. Aircraft carrier attack group that was sent to confront Iran, now hides itself 1,000 kilometers away from the Iranian coastline, and it sits behind mountains in Oman, so it doesn't get hit by Iranian missiles. So how the heck is U.S. Navy going to carry out a blockade? And then further out of that blockade range, in the Indian Ocean, Chinese Navy actually have several warships in the area. They were there on a routine mission because China do operate its only overseas base in Djibouti, which is just around the corner near the Red Sea. And the Chinese Navy has been in the area for routine anti-piracy operations. So is U.S. Navy gonna engage the Chinese Navy in the Indian Ocean? I mean, come on. I don't see that happening. That's too crazy. So because we're talking about this because Iran is allowing Chinese tankers to go through right now. We have several Chinese oil tankers that just transited through the Strait of Hormuz. Now, what's U.S. gonna do? Are they gonna try to board those Chinese tankers? U.S. By the way, U.S. did this back in 1990. I believe it was 1992. This is a little incident called the Yinghe incident, when a Chinese ship, not an oil tanker, but one of the bulk carriers that was sailing for Iran was stopped on the was intercepted on the high sea by the U.S. Navy. The way the U.S. Navy did that was they cut off the GPS signals. So the ship was essentially adrift at sea without navigation. And then U.S. demanded that they will board. The U.S. claimed, the CIA claimed that the Chinese ship was carrying chemicals, precursors for making chemical weapons for Iran. So they demand to board the ship to do a search. And China, of course, refused. So there was a standoff at sea for about a month, 30 days. Eventually, U.S., Saudi Arabia, and China work out a deal where the Chinese ship would dock at port in Saudi Arabia with a joint Saudi-American team to board the ship to do inspection. And then they found nothing. And the U.S. complained that was a trap. That was a Chinese trap to discredit the CIA. But that actually created a huge psychological impact in China. So first thing China did is they realized they cannot rely on GPS anymore. That's something that United States has control over that can turn off anytime. So China embarked on building its own satellite system, the Beidou navigation system, which incidentally that Iran switched to, after the 12, even before the 12 days war, because Iran also realized they cannot rely on GPS because United States will shut it off. So they switched to the Chinese Beidou navigation system. And as we have seen, during this war, Iran has been pretty accurate with their targeting. They knew what to hit, where to hit. There is some accusation from Washington that China is helping Iran with satellite targeting stuff. But so what? I mean, what is United States going to do? Trump actually there was a recent Wall Street Journal. Is the Wall Street Journal or Bloomberg or maybe FT report that claims that China is supplying Iran with the shoulder-fired ground-to-air missiles, the Manpads.
Right.
Yeah. And to that, Trump is saying if China has done that, if China has supplied weapon to Iran, I'm going to slap 50% tariff on China. Well, Trump might be too short memory to remember he already lost the tariff war against China.
Now, where the tariffs were 180%.
This humiliation by Iran at the Strait of Hormuz. He's asking for another humiliation, for another round of trade war. So again, Trump just making threat all day, and whether he carries out, who knows? And how is he gonna carry out? I don't even know, because like I said, the whole 1,000 kilometers from Iranian's coastline is no-go zone for U.S. Navy right now because it's well within the Iranian missile range. And beyond that, there's Chinese warships in the Indian Ocean, and they could potentially function as escort for the Chinese tankers. And if U.S. do anything, this is 2026. This is not 1992, 1993. There's no way U.S. will be able to forcibly board a Chinese oil tanker, and there's no way China will allow that to happen. So does United States want a World War III? I mean, you can't even handle Iran. Forget about confronting China. They're depleting their arsenal at a dangerously low level. Now it's been reported they have been digging into the reserves they have been saving for the big confrontation with China. Because they're just running low on ammunition, and there's no way they could replenish that, because China also have the export control on rare earth critical minerals to United States.
Right.
China has an export control on tungsten, on gallium, on a whole series of critical minerals that U.S. needs to go into its Patriot missiles, to go into cruise missiles, to go into F-35s. I mean, at the current state of U.S. In military industrial complex, it just simply cannot replenish in time. So my bet is this is just another one of Donald Trump's empty threat.
Yeah, I mean, Trump was even making this argument, or apparently what they were reporting was that even ships that pay the toll, because Iran is effectively setting up a toll system. In fact, you can make an argument they've already set up the toll system, they've already formalized it, but they are, I guess, nailing it down at this point. And many of the countries around the globe are effectively saying they will pay the toll. Now, this is mind-blowing, right? And I think people need to kind of accommodate this. This is a new norm going forward. You've gotten a regional power that would have never done this, that has now enacted something that the US can't do anything about, and that other countries are acknowledging facts on the ground by effectively making deals in order to pay the tolls. Now, the US is saying we will interdict any ship that pays the toll, which is, again, I don't know what that means. What are you going to do? Stop ships? You're going to board ships from other countries? Like, are you really trying to claim that this is within your power to do? That's wild. Like, that's a new norm.
And Jamar, Iran is no longer a regional power. Trump has made sure Iran is now a world superpower because Iran holds 20% of the world's energy supply, world's oil supply and gas supply within its hands. And there's nothing United States can do about it because they tried. I mean, there's no way they can somehow took this control away from Iran.
Right.
That's in fact one of Iran's key demands. One of the 10 demands is recognize Iranian military control over the Strait of Hormuz, and they wanted to enshrine it with a UN resolution.
Yeah, think about that.
This is something that United States cannot accept because if U.S. do accept the 10 demands for Iran, which included United States pulling out all its military bases from Middle East, and allow Iran has a right to enrich Iranian, lift all sanctions on Iran. So basically, it means complete defeat of United States in West
Complete
Asia.
Capitulation, like complete and full capitulation. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe these things are related, maybe these things aren't. But Taiwan's opposition leader, well, I guess there are two things. Before I get to that one, is China, and has there been any reporting from the Chinese side about whether or not, basically, what we're in those cargo planes going to Tehran? I mean, look, it doesn't matter, right? I mean, it does, but it doesn't. The United States has been supplying Ukraine for God knows how long. Europe has been supplying Ukraine. The U.S. doesn't have a leg to stand on. They've been arming Taiwan, for God's sake. So this doesn't matter. But I am curious on whether or not anything is in those cargo planes in the context of rearming or reloading Iran?
Well,
And has there been
we
any
don't know.
reporting from the
Right? I
Chinese side
mean,
about it?
we don't know. Right now,
Okay.
you always have to take those Wall Street Journal, uh, Bloomberg reporting, FT, whatever those Western mainstream media reporting. You always have to take them with a generous salt, a lot of salt actually, because they usually quote anonymous U.S. intelligence official, right? I mean, first of all, when you hear U.S. intelligence, you should not trust it because U.S. intelligence is oxymoron. There's no such thing as U.S. intelligence, and then China. Well, we do know that China did supply Iran with chemical precursors that will need to make more missiles. I mean,
I
China
see.
has done that before 12 Days War, after 12 Days War. So we know Iran has enough raw material to continue their missile production, which is not, same thing cannot be said about United States because China has a critical mineral rare earth ban on export to United States military industrial complex. This is why the Pentagon is panicking. You know, every missile they fire, every missile interceptor they fire, every cruise missile they fire is one less in the arsenal, and that cannot be easily replaced because
Yeah.
they don't have another alternative supply chain for those minerals. And yeah, so this is why yeah, like you say, it doesn't really matter. I mean, whether China did deliver those man pads, it's up to anybody's guess. But it actually makes sense for if that did happen, it actually does make sense because the more bulkier, more sophisticated anti-aircraft, anti-air defense like HQ-9, those are big targets themselves, and they
Right.
also have to requires extensive training. You know, they'll probably takes like 6 months to a year to train Iranian personnel and to have Iranian to be able to integrate it in their own system because modern warfare is all about system integration,
Right.
and it would just take too long. But manpads, those things are, you know, fire and forget, and it's very like Afghans were able to use those stingers to take down the Soviet
Soviets.
helicopters,
Yeah.
and those manpads present a credible threat to low flying aircrafts, whether it's fixed wing aircraft or helicopters,
Mhm.
and this would having enough manpads in hands will there will be a big deterrent to any U.S. ground invasion. You know, because this is something that Donald Trump has repeatedly talked about that he planned to do, and I think they did try. You know, this whole. I don't believe that whole rescue pilot officials like Hollywood story that came out of the White House because
What are you
Trump said
are
they
you
said
saying that my president is lying about a guy who's injured and ran 200 kilometers for 24 hours? Is that what you're saying, Carl? What? Oh
I
man.
mean, like Trump himself said they sent 153 aircraft to rescue that down pilot. First of all, you don't need
Right.
153 aircrafts, right? I mean, like, why would you need 153 aircraft to save one guy? You want like a top secret mission, go quick in and out, right? Why would you need 153 aircraft, out of which you have multiple C-130 Hercules military transport plane that's
My
capable
God.
of carrying multiple helicopters and hundreds of special forces. I mean,
Yeah.
it just so happened they all landed at the airport in Isfahan, the place that near where Iran has their nuclear site. You know, and all the timeline you look at. You know, first we got the leak that Trump authorized the grab for uranium, you know, the special
Yep.
force out to get you, which is a stupidest plan to come out of White House, which is
Yep.
saying a lot. And then you had the Pete Hegseth firing what like 12 generals because they
Yeah.
probably told him this is a stupid idea.
Right.
This is the dumbest idea ever. And he
Yeah.
fired them all. And the next thing you know, within 48 hours, Iran shot down 12 U.S. aircraft. I mean, 12
Yep.
U.S. aircraft went down, right? Just in a span of 48 hours. And,
Yep.
you know, the whole story about them, they have to blow up their own aircraft because they the landing gear was stuck in mud. I mean, I don't know, man. This is all too much Hollywood stuff for me. Like the heavily wounded pilot somehow was able to climb 7,700 feet mountain to hide himself in the crevices. This is like like a Top Gun Maverick stuff, right? I mean, like.
Yeah.
You heads have watched a Hollywood movie. That's it. That's the plan we're going for.
You know what it put me in mind of? The whole the Gilligan, the skipper on the SS Minnow blowing up Nord Stream pipeline, and the US had nothing to do with it. It puts me in mind of that, right? It makes no sense. And yet that's what they're effectively selling, because they don't want to own up to the fact that Iran blew those planes up. They just can't accept it. And that the mission failed miserably. All of this stuff just was nonsense. Carl, before I let you go, I have to get to Taiwan opposition leader in China.
Yes.
I'm fascinated by that story. And immediately after the opposition leader leaves, China basically offers their 10-point, I can't call it reintegration, but at the very least, it seems like resuming ties of sorts. What's going on with this? And is it related in any way to what seems to be a massive failure in Iran? Or are these stories disconnected?
I think what's happening in West Asia, it does serve an alarm bell to all the so-called U.S. ally in Asia Pacific. First of all, it showed that by hosting U.S. bases, that's by no way guarantee of your safety. The reason for the U.S. empire alliances in West Asia is to provide a security shield for GCC countries. It turns out it's nothing of the sort. It was a liability. It gets these countries bombed. And when it comes to China has a magnitude more missiles, more advanced missiles than Iran, right? There's no, if United States cannot handle Iran in West Asia, there's no way you can handle China in West Pacific. And all the U.S. bases in surrounding China is going to be lit. They're all going to be lit. And now all these other countries have to rethink their relationship with the United States. Now, this is the first Taiwan opposition. So KMT is Taiwan's main opposition party. This is the first KMT to CPC top leadership meeting in 10 years. So it's quite significant. And one of the things that Zheng Liwen actually said was, we do not want Taiwan to be a battlefield. If you truly love Taiwan, you would not want Taiwan to be a battlefield. You can see what happened to Ukraine. We do not want to be a Ukraine in East Asia, right? And look at what happened after the war in Iran got kicked off. U.S. Missile interceptor got so depleted that they have to dismantle their THAAD anti-missile system in South Korea to ship them to West Asia. Why? Because Israel is under pressure. And here you have South Korea, a country with 50 million people, one of the world's top 10 economies. But U.S. just said, sorry, you're not that important. We have to protect our golden boy. sorry, we have to take away those missile shields and move them to protect Israel, right? Because that's our top priority. This can serve alarm bell to all the countries in East Asia. None of them can hope to compete with the golden boy Israel, right? I mean, like, when the shit hits the fan, they are going to be the one that will be sacrificed by the United States. I mean, that was a plan all along. The role they're supposed to serve is as a missile shield to soak up enough Chinese missile barrages, so less Chinese missile will hit the U.S. Navy ships, right? And so Zheng Liwen is just being smart about it, and she's actually scheduled to visit United States later.
Yes, he is.
So she's actually, this is very shrewd politically, because by going to China first and having a very well-received, high-profile reception, now United States can't do anything but to be nice to her. She's telling the United States, "Hey, we have options. Look, we have options. China, Chinese government embrace us. If you don't be nice to us, our relationship could be jeopardized." And so politically, it's a smart move for her as well. And so I think overall, this is a positive trend in the cross-strait relationship. It also sets a tone that this is something, whatever Taiwan issue is, it's something to be settled by Chinese people on both sides of Taiwan Strait, right? Like this is this doesn't need to involve another power, outside power, to butt themselves in.
What do you think the chances of Kuomintang Party taking power? Because I remember the last time we talked, you mentioned how it's like two opposition groups clashed in regards to polling, meaning they pull votes from each other, allowing the main party to effectively take power. So is it that there's a majority of Taiwanese that's effectively against this kind of opposition to China, or is there a chance for the Kuomintang Party to take power?
President, the current quote-unquote president of Taiwan, he won the election with 40% of the votes, right? Because the 60% that voted against him, the opposition vote was split between two parties. So that's something that KMT still need to work out with the other party, TPP, on how they want to do this, how they want to be effective, united opposition to DPP. Because most of the people in Taiwan are sick and tired of the DPP party that have been ruling Taiwan for the last decades. And the economy hasn't gone anywhere. They're facing all the same problem that's facing the Western advanced economy, which is economic stagnation, diminished economic prospect for the young people, and like the bright light in the region is the growth of the Chinese economy next door, which they have failed to leverage. So this is why I think the potential is there for a KMT sweeping victory in November in November this year, if they get their shit together to coordinate with the other opposition party, TPP, because they can say, "Oh, in this city, if the KMT has more chance to win, then TPP they can pull out their candidate, throw their support behind KMT. But in another city, maybe the TPP candidate has better chance. The KMT withdrew their candidate and allow TPP to win over DPP. So if that kind of if they can carry out such coordination, there's a good chance to unseat the ruling party DPP from most of the mayoral elections in Taiwan, and that will pave a way for the presidential election in 2028.
One more thing before I let you go. We have about 2 minutes. What do you think this meeting between Trump and Xi Jinping is going to look like now that Trump has lost this war? And I'm putting in lost because the war is still going on. But I'm saying the U.S. is obviously at a strategic disadvantage in regards to this conflict. They can't accomplish the objectives. And the quote-unquote blockade is a desperate, half-ass fallback position. And I don't even want to call it a fallback position. The U.S. went into this war believing that it could accomplish objectives. It failed miserably in accomplishing those objectives. And now it's like, okay, that failed. Now what are we going to do? Oh, I know. Let's do a blockade. It's that, right? How is he going, or what is this conversation going to look like with Xi Jinping? A, if this war is still going on, or B, if he just outright loses?
Well, first of all, there's a reason Donald Trump delayed the meeting in the first place, because the Iran war hasn't gone the way he wanted it, and because originally, according to all the MAGA and neocon think tanks, going after Venezuela, going after Iran is really Trump playing the 5D chess to choke off energy supply to China, right? And it turns out that didn't play so well So instead of going to Beijing with all the leverage over Xi Jinping, Trump is going to look very weak. That's why he delayed the trip, hoping that in the meantime he can salvage the situation. But one important thing to know is it's the American side that says, okay, this is a new date. Beijing has never confirmed the dates. The only thing the Chinese have said is we're still in talk with Americans about the scheduling. They never confirmed the dates. So right now, I'm sorry, the Chinese government is much more credible than the Trump administration. If China has confirmed the date, that means the date, the meeting is going forward on such said date. If just Americans said such date, I'm sorry, man, that means nothing. Because until Chinese government official have confirmed the date of Trump's visit, it's still up in the air. We still don't even know if it's going to happen. So we just have to wait and see.
Interesting. I didn't. Oh wow. Okay, fair enough. Carl, man, it is great to see you again. It is great. I always enjoy talking to you. I swear to God. You be safe, man, and have a really good night. Thank you for this.
Thank you.
And just so the audience would know, before I let you go, Carl Jha, I always like to give the audience an idea of who I'm talking to. And again, since I've gone partially blind, I have to use glasses. Carl Jha, he's host of Silk and Steel podcast, focused on China and surrounding regions and their history, culture, and politics. You can follow Carl on Twitter at Carl Jha, his podcast on Twitter at Steel Silk N, and subscribe and support his podcast at patreon.com/Silk and Steel. Carl, you're a fantastic man. Thank you for this.
Thank you, Jamar. Anytime.
Have a good one. Be safe. All right. Carl, shout out to him. We are waiting on the next guest. Issa Bloomy is supposed to be on. But in lieu of him coming on and waiting for him to come on for a bit, what is this? Oh, okay. I see. In lieu of him. That's weird. Yeah, that's weird. The StreamYard has made changes since last I've been on, so it's a little bit odd. But nevertheless, we're waiting on Issa. Let me make sure, send him a secondary message. Make sure I didn't miss anything. Yep. All right. What I suspect is happening is a time zone switch. He may still be going by the old time zone. That's okay. One of the interesting things that a lot of people, I don't know if they discussed about the events that has taken place over the weekend. So just to get people up to date, obviously there was a negotiation that took place, put it in quotes. I still think the United States is negotiation adverse, and it is impossible to have a negotiation with a country that believes itself and is, for all intents and purposes, a hegemon, is dealing with a regional power. And it is very difficult for that country to accept failure. It looks bad. A US president doesn't necessarily want to face the country and explain failure. What's interesting about this is that one party got us involved into the Ukraine war. The other party got us involved into the Iranian war. Both political parties are effectively following US policy as a whole in regards to this idea of hegemonic domination. The problem is that this is not the 1990s, and it doesn't seem that that country can accept that the world has fundamentally changed. Each crisis that the US provokes has made other countries stronger, not weaker. Put that in context. When the United States decided to overthrow the government of Ukraine, the die was cast, and it was clear that Russia was going to respond to it. Now, the Hobbes choice that the United States was trying to force Russia into being either you accept the U.S., let's say, in control of a country that is literally on your border and that has been used to invade Russia on more than one occasion. The first time around, killing around 10 million Russians. The second time around, killing nearly 30 million. And I mean Soviets in this case. Obviously, that is an impossible choice to allow. Either Russia takes a muscular action, which they were ill prepared to do, or they allowed themselves to be surrounded. And obviously, they took the muscular action. And the military that started off at 150,000 has swelled to nearly 1 million with a military industrial base and an economy that is built around that military industrial base with preparation, not just for the Ukraine war, but for a third world war. That is what you've created. So whereas Europe will talk a lot of trash and say that Russia's military is a paper tiger and all this other stuff, that has obviously been proven to be false, considering they have been decimating Ukraine with the backing of all of Europe and the US. I hope you understand my point. If power is a shadow on the wall, this idea of NATO being an entity and a powerful entity has been found lacking because of the conflict that was provoked in Ukraine on the Russian border. Trump gets in office, decides he wants to have an economic war. And in the context of having this economic war, decides to have it against the entirety of the world, but specifically against China. In having this economic war, some countries knuckle under, European Union, because they're vassals. Many of the Gulf states gave all sorts of money to Trump. China told him to fuck off. And what did the US do? It fucked off. All right, that's two countries, two objectives, both of which failed, and both of which failed on the global stage. Okay, if power is a shadow on the wall, what is this beginning to look like, right? You knock over Venezuela. Congratulations. Good job, I suppose. You take down Syria. It took 20 years to do it, but you were able to do it. Congratulations, I suppose. Once Syria falls, Israel is like, hey man, we've committed a genocide. Nobody did anything about it. We've been murdering Lebanese for the last X amount of time period. Nobody has really done anything about it. Iran is looking vulnerable, and we've attacked them, and they haven't really done anything back to us, not in any real terms. Fuck it. We have an opportunity. We have a patsy in the White House. Let's convince that patsy to do what the other presidents wouldn't do. So let's attack Iran. You have a 12-day war where Israel can't accept the fact that it was beaten and was begging for a ceasefire. And once again, they decide, let's go after Iran. Your humble hosts had pointed out that just because Iran was pragmatic and didn't necessarily want a war, didn't necessarily mean that they couldn't fight a war. And here we are with the US attacking Iran. And with all the objectives that the United States believed it could accomplish in a very short, brutal, violent war, it wasn't a short, brutal, vital war. It elongated. And so the US and Israel are not in a position to be able to accomplish those objectives. And so you have the US beating down Iran still for a ceasefire and is using Pakistan as a means of trying to trap Iran into talks. The US immediately violated the ceasefire, goes into talks without any real preparation for actual talks. Because again, negotiations usually, especially in wars, take time. And the US is trying to get it done in 24 hours in order to reopen the strait. That doesn't work. And so they immediately fall back into blockade or fall into a blockade, something that Iran was already doing. And I understand that the purpose of it, with the idea being, okay, well, Iran is not going to be able to choose which ships go in and go out because the US is going to blockade all ships from going in and out, which kind of emboldens Iran's strategy of blocking ships from going in and out. I guess the thought is, okay, well, we can't stop you from your control of the Strait of Hormuz, but what we can do is just stop all ships from going through, which on some level undercuts your control of it because it stops all ships from going through. But again, that defeats the purpose, right? The entire point of Trump trying to get a ceasefire was to reopen the strait. And what he is effectively is doing is doubling down on blockading a blockade. What do all three of these situations have in common? One, it's the US creating chaos for the sake of chaos. Basically, we believe that we can get something out of it. We have a theory of the world. And in our theory of the world, basically, this is our idea of how to win. And oftentimes those ideas have proven fanciful, hubristic, and it's ran contrary, headlong, into reality itself. There's that. The second one is, in all of these, we failed. Or let's say, failing. The war in Ukraine still continues. The war against Iran still continues. The economic war against China, falling apart, but there's still pressure that is continuously being applied in these situations. I hope you get my point. There are three countries that the US continues to bump heads up with. Those three countries are China, Russia, and Iran. All three of these countries are on some level working in tandem with one another. They may not be coming to military assistance in the sense of putting troops within each other, but they are, from a standpoint of intelligence, equipment, etc., or for that matter, financial assistance, working in tandem with one another. And the US is running headlong and it's hitting its head on all three. And as it hits its head on all three, it is showing that it doesn't have the power that it believes it has. And if power is a shadow on the wall, that shadow is diminishing with each conflict. Now the catch becomes, this is a new world. And what I mean by that is, this is multipolarity coming into fruition. The global economy is going to take a hit. And the catch becomes, what does that look like in practice? And I would say, and a lot of people may be mad at me for saying this, it is required. It's required. How long can this country go about killing, murdering, acting with complete impunity in regards to the way it treats other countries? We've just been in a situation where we were murdering fishermen in the Caribbean with no consequence for doing so. And the only time somebody said anything about it was when we double tapped several innocent people in a boat and lied about it. How long can that happen and go on without there be any consequence? The war that took place in Ukraine has killed, what, 1 million people, 1 million men? Hundreds of thousands of dead Ukrainians, like 700,000 dead Ukrainians over the course of 4 years. A war that never needed to take place, that we are infinitely responsible for pushing in regards to this expansion of NATO. We knew that this was going to be horrific, and we didn't care because, hey, they're just Ukrainians. They're not us. They're our proxies. At what point is there a consequence? And how long does the American public want to pay for these foreign wars abroad? I'm tired of doing so. Until there's a consequence, this keeps continuing. Just saying. I think it's one of the most patriotic things in the world to point out that, hey, there's a fire in this establishment, and something needs to be done about the fact that there's a fire in this establishment. And up to this point, it seems that until there's a reckoning, a Suez Canal moment, it doesn't happen. I have no belief that Russia and China, but for that matter, nor do I want there to be a third world war. Short of there being a third world war, the reckoning has to be internal, which means that something needs to take place that imparts cost on the way that we operate. With $37 trillion in debt, the number is going to go through the roof. But that's not the cost I'm talking about. I'm talking about costs from the standpoint of the public and people, where they no longer accept what Washington is doing apathetically. That means if gas prices need to go to $500, if industries need to start shutting down, kind of like they're doing in Germany, I mean, cost. It's one thing if we are attacked. And in the context of us being attacked, where there are enemies at our gates, and we end up at war because we're being attacked or we're being threatened, and we have to take on hardship, meaning, hey, we have to bend down the hatches, we're at war, we all agree we're at war, we agree that we've been attacked, and we're responding to the fact that we're attacked by locking hands and accepting hardship. If that means gas going up, that's a hardship we're accepting because we've been attacked and we acknowledge we've been attacked. That's not what's happening, though. This is the opposite of that. This is a war of aggression, another war of aggression. Do you remember when Jen Psaki comes out and says something like, values are not without cost? Effectively saying, we are at war with Russia because of our values and the difference in our values. And those values, quote unquote, are not without cost. The cost being us being inflation, quote unquote, Putin's price hike, as they were trying to sell it. This is another war of aggression. And in the context of this war of aggression, there will be consequences in regards to cost. Things will get more expensive because energy is going to get more expensive. And if you get to a situation where gas is $300, $400 a barrel, oh my God, what is the American public going to say about that, considering we acknowledge and understand this war never needed to take place, and this is a war of aggression that Donald Trump is pushing? There's a secondary question about Gulf states. That's a whole nother conversation. The world, whether they're looking at Ukraine, oh my God, Ukraine wasn't protected. Oh my God, the Gulf states weren't protected. Like, what does it mean when you acknowledge that those bases are not things of protection, but they are targets, they're sponges, magnets for missiles from whatever country the United States is fighting at the moment? What does it mean? Let's go to the chats, because I am trying to make a habit of going to chats before going to guests, or before either asking guests about the chats, or for that matter, reading them. Obviously, super chats and memberships will bubble up for obvious reasons of having to support the channel, but I will be going to the chat in general. So let's go to the first one. This is so humiliating. I'm always amazed when I see an American citizen joking about the brave people from Venezuela who fought alone against a criminal country and criminal blockade imposed again by your military. I'm not joking about it. Who's joking about it? I'm pointing out that the US military was murdering innocent human beings. And in the context of murdering innocent human beings, there was no consequence for it. That's not joking. That is literally what took place. The US government gave orders to effectively murder people in the Caribbean. And these weren't people who were fighting, these were people who were fishing. The US government made the argument that they were effectively killing drug smugglers. And the only time the US took issue, or the media took issue, was when there was a double tap. Who's joking about it? It's literally what happened. It's literally what took place. From the point of view of the US media, there was no issue with Trump giving orders to murder Venezuelans, or for that matter, what was the other country? I can't think of the other one. It'll come to me in a moment. The only time the US media took issue was with the double tap. That was it. Unfortunately, that's not a joke. Unfortunately, that is literally what took place. But if you think I'm joking about it, I'm not. And I apologize if it came across that way, but I'm not joking about it. Kate Griff, $5. Thank you, Kate Griff. You have my appreciation. Why am I seeing 3? Or am I just misreading that? Oh, it says 2. I'm sorry. Once I put the glasses on, it's clear that it's been true. That was number 2. Look, guys, you can support the content, PayPal, Patreon, Super Chats. Obviously, Super Chats will be read first, but the rest will also be read. But no, I'm not joking about it. I'm curious. God damn it. I'm curious to see what the empire would do to save Israel. The public have no appetite for any more. Yeah, that's also true, right? Like, what's wild about this is that this is reshaping international order. And the reality, and the other reality is the US obviously had plans for what they wanted to do. Iran has effectively said, we are shutting down the strait. Full stop. The US obviously doesn't want to shut down. But the fact that other countries are saying, okay, we're willing to negotiate with Iran, that's not rhetoric, right? Like, that's not a situation where a politician gets up and gives rhetoric. That is, we are controlling a reality on the ground. All right. Now, what about other countries? Do other countries accept that reality? Or do other countries fall in line with the ideological rhetoric? Well, hey man, I need gas. I need aluminum. I need helium. I need things. I need real physical matter reality things. So while I appreciate your bluster, I will make a deal with Iran because I need those things. This puts you in the mind of it's power in the context of commodities. It's kind of the same thing with Russia, right? all of the bluster, and that countries are like, hey, we need gas. And if they're going to sell us that gas at a really good price, we're going to buy that gas at that good price. I understand your feelings, but we need real things. It's that. It's commodities. And so the reality is being determined and set by other countries who are making deals with Iran because they have things that those countries need. Can you do something about it? Yeah or nay? Nay. Or at the very least, there's a blockade that is going to be, we're going to see. One last point before Mark comes on. What time is it? Okay. There are a lot of people who are going with this idea, that Trump is somehow unique. He's not. You could say he's grotesque, yes. You could say that for all intents and purposes, he seems more obsequious to Israel. Okay, fair enough. But truth be told, this is a continuation of US policy, not some radical departure from US policy. The reality of it is, with the fall of Syria, something that presidents have been effectively working towards, especially Obama putting in billions of dollars into it, Iran became a target and became that much more viable of a target. It was always US policy to go after Iran, at the very least going back to the Bush administration. And so from one president after the next, they whittled away at Syria up until the point where Syria fell, which now you get the culmination of US policy that Donald Trump effectively went for. While they're saying Israel is the one that is causing it and that Israel needs to be negotiated with, the idea that the United States needs to negotiate with Israel, a country that we give billions to, that we give protection to in regards to the UN Security Council, and that we give cover to politically, that we have to negotiate with them, is nonsense. It's just complete nonsense. They are a stalking horse. They are the sin eater. They are the ones who are our proxy in that region. And while there may be, let's say, slight differences in regards to wants, for all intents and purposes, they're our dog doing the dog's work on our behalf. It is not the tail wagging the dog. The dog's tail is being firmly wagged by the dog. The entire point of it is for Israel to take the blame and to be the tip of the spear for US policy in the region. Full stop. We are not subservient to Israeli policy. Israeli policy is being enacted by it. Basically, Israel is enacting US policy. And let's be honest, it wants the Greater Israel Project. So these policies on some level dovetail. I am super curious on where the Gulf states are going to go with this. I am super curious where the Gulf states are going to go with this. We'll see. We will see. But I understand that some people have this idea that the U.S. is just doing Israel's bidding. I'm sorry, it's not that way. This is U.S. policy manifest. And this is the culmination of decades of U.S. policy. Iran, from their position, needs to understand that the issue is not nukes. The issue is not missiles. The issue is that Iran exists, period. And for all intents and purposes, this war was always going to come to Iran's doorstep. And to Iran's credit, They were preparing for it as they understood it was going to come to their doorstep. And regardless of my annoyances sometimes with the reformist government and everything else, there is something to be said. And people have made this argument on the channel, and maybe the argument is right, that the public of Iran was not necessarily in the same mindset as, let's say, the revolutionaries that took power from the Shah and from the United States, and that they weren't alive during that time period, and they had to be oriented to understand, hey man, it's not us. We are under threat, and that threat is existential. And one of the ways that you're able to demonstrate that is when you're in the middle of negotiations and you are attacked. When you have foreign powers murdering the Ayatollah. Those things get across to the youth. Hey, maybe these old folks had a point. Maybe these old folks are right. Like, you've reorient your society in a sense based on the threats that are leveled at that society. Let's see, who else do we have? Right here. I disagree. The U.S. is taking marching orders from Ball. You'll see the writing on the wall. Fair enough. Fair enough. Let's see, what's this one? The Jewish supremacist mob faction in the Epstein class is a client of the empire. Well, I mean, ask yourself the question, right? Like, you get them taking down Iraq, you get them taking down Afghanistan, taking down Libya, taking down Syria. Where does that pathway lead? And if presidents from the Democratic and Republican Party are effectively, they may be using different reasons, but it's inexorably going in one direction, then this isn't individual singular policy. This is just U.S. policy being enacted using, whatever rationale that's necessary in the moment for that policy to be effectuated. And while some presidents might, let's say, not believe that the U.S. is in a position economically, militarily, or otherwise to do something at the moment, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing anything against that particular policy, or for that matter, that they're not still enacting that policy in, unscrupulous but secretive ways or clandestine ways. I'm saying whether it was Trump or whether it was another president, we were always going to end up in this position. And so, do we want to take the hit? And do we want to take the blame for it? Or would we want a stalking horse to take that blame? And the answer is we would prefer the stalking horse to take the blame, hence the existence of Israel. Now, you could say that there's an interplay between the U.S. and Israel. Yes, that may be true, especially over time as that dividing line between the two and the wants between those two things have lessened. In the old days, you get Richard Nixon making the argument saying that there's a difference between Israel and the U.S., et cetera. But nevertheless, pathway to Persia is still in effect. Still in effect. You just have somebody competent at the helm. You have incompetence at the helm. Let's see. Okay, where's Mark? Okay, Mark's still trying. Come on, Mark. Come on. Okay, hopefully. My other guests still join. We're waiting on Mark But while we wait on Mark, let's go to another question. How the fuck do you explain 200 years of expansion before a scapegoat existed? Stupid ass people, for fuck's sake. What? How do you explain 200 years of expansion, right? Before scapegoating existed? I don't quite understand the question. Brookings Institute paper 2009 about Persia. Yeah, Pathway to Persia. That's the name of it. Yes, that guest's name. Where is it? Yes, that guest is supposed to be coming on right now because it's 8 a.m. unless he said he was coming on at 8:15. Hold on, let me make sure. That's the other big news, right? Orban goes down. Orban goes down. Oh, 8:15. Okay, I'll see you at 8:15. Okay, so Mark could be on in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, give or take. Yeah, Orban goes down. Now, Mark is going to be on. Mark is going to hit that story in addition to the latest news on the Ukraine war. But we do need to talk about that. Viktor Orban has been instrumental in being, let's say, the sane, rational voice in the context of the Ukraine war. Understand, the war in Ukraine has done Europe no favors. You can look at German economy, you can look at the UK economy, you can look at the French economy. All of these things were under stress in and of itself. All of these budgets were under pressure in and of itself. And when the war took place, all of a sudden, all of them screamed that, oh my God, this war was completely unforeseeable. The Russians invaded for no reason. And now we need to fight the Russians because the Russians are effectively the new Nazis. Okay. And these governments have been dumping billions, hundreds of billions, into a losing, failing war that just keeps rattling on, with the US effectively pushing those governments to continue the war effort, especially under Joe Biden. And let's be honest, even under Trump, who, despite all of the rhetoric, still wants Europe to buy all of the weapons and everything else. My point is that they've been dumping hundreds of billions of dollars with their economies already under significant pressure. Orban has been one of the main voices saying, this makes no sense. We are being fleeced in a war that A, should have never happened, and B, needs to stop, considering the number of people that have been killed in a war on European soil. Orban, for the longest time, had been a lone voice in the wind of common sense and rationality. And Europe has hated him for it, especially considering he has been one of those people that has been trying to hold up a lot of the European policy that they've been trying to do in order to keep the war going or make the war even worse. Eventually, Slovakia comes into play as a joining voice. Czech Republic comes in as another voice speaking aloud. You got the gentleman from Gogetsku? I think that's the name. But they got rid of him. So he was never allowed to even finish the election and was kicked out, and Romania became another vassal. But long story short, though, Orban has been one of the main voices, and it is in Hungary's interests, especially since they get 80 to 90% of their energy from Russia. So now this new guy comes in, and the catch is, what is he going to do? What is he going to do? And what does it mean for Russia? that Orban is out. Peter Magyar, Peter Magyar, he will be taking power in Hungary. That is a sea change. That is a sea change. And so, yeah, Mark is going to be on. Mark is going to have the conversation about effectively what is that going to mean in the context of the war? What is it going to mean in the context of Europe? Yeah, it's a sea change. It's a sea change. I mean, ever since I've been doing radio, Orban has been in power. And Hungary has been this kind of sane voice. I guess the other question is, what does this mean for Israel, right? I mean, Orban was a Zionist. Orban thought it was perfectly okay for Netanyahu to cross in the airspace and stuff like that. What does it mean in general? I don't have an answer for that. It is unclear, at least to me, what Magyar's political objectives are going to be. I mean, and he didn't just win, he won decisively. I mean, even the question of why he won is interesting, right? It's just fascinating. What is this? Orban is pissed off because he had plans to build a Russian nuclear power plant in Hungary. Why he hates the EU policy. Orban was a mixed bag. Yeah, nobody said Orban was perfect, but you must understand, from my point of view, the Ukraine war never should have taken place. And this provocative, continuous, inexorable movement of NATO closer and closer to the Russian border in order to create this kind of Hobbes choice of either you accept us surrounding you or you get militarily involved, in which case we can now scream that you are invading a sovereign nation. Yeah, you get all of these fall down consequences from the standpoint of Europe, where there's this blowback. And Orban is like, dude, this makes no sense. It's not that Orban was perfect. That was never the argument. It was in the context of the war, he seemed to be the rational actor, as opposed to getting 1 million people killed in a war that never needed to take place. Yeah, it's just wild. Yeah, nobody said he was perfect. It's just in the context of war, he was the rational person saying, why are we doing this? How is this in our interests? How is this in European interests? You know, look at all these people that have been being killed. Russia's obviously winning, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah. What's this one? What is this? You wish you were a Jeffro, just so I could get to know. What? Sometimes, like this one time, I wish I was a Jeffro lookalike, just so I could get to know you better on familiar. Oh, Jesus. Jesus Christ. Okay, y'all talking shit to each other. That's because they didn't want NATO countries to depend on cheap Russian gas. You're talking about the US. Yeah. You're talking about the US. Yeah. Yeah. Basically, hey, we sell gas. We would prefer you to buy our gas. It becomes that, right? I mean, even from the pipelines. What was it? What is his name? Joe Biden's not national security advisor. Jesus Christ, what is a sociopath's name? He wrote the book. I think it was called Pipeline Wars. It was something to that effect. Yeah. Ask the regular European what they think of paying triple for their energy. So, yes. And when I was working at the network, I was sent to cover the European elections and the European parliamentary elections. And what's wild about it, when you're talking to just regular Europeans coming out of the voting booths, and you talk to them and you ask them questions, they don't associate, not entirely, or at the very least not at that moment, what was happening in Europe with US policy. It's very strange. Like the migrant issue, for example, like the number of people who were flooding into Europe. But those people were flooding into Europe in many respects because of the wars that the US was having in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, et cetera, et cetera. Basically, the Middle Eastern wars that the United States was involved in was causing a huge influx of people into Europe. And my thing was like, okay, you're complaining about immigration. Do you associate the wars that the United States are involved in with the immigrants that are coming into Europe? And of course, the answer was no. It was strange. It was very strange. But maybe that's not the case anymore. Who knows? Maybe that's not the case. What is this one? Fitting that the end of the global European colonialism ended in Central Europe with the collapse of the last absolute monarchy in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. But see, that's the other thing, right? All of this talk and this screaming that Orban was a dictator. And yet he was just removed in an election. And yeah, I know that he's not leading today. But I hope you get my point. He just lost in an election. How is he a dictator if the will of the public was effectuated by the vote? I mean, all of this nonsense, all of this talk, and come to find out at the end of the day, Orban loses in an election, indicating that all of the screaming that he was a dictator was false. It was false. But my man is here. I have not seen you forever. The man himself, Mark Labota, international relations, security analyst. You can find him on Boosty under Real Politic with Mark Labota. My man, how you doing, Mark?
Tomorrow, I'm alive. How the hell are you?
I am apparently also alive, contrary to a lot of popular belief over the last 3 months. No, man, it's good to see you, Mark. It's good to hear from you, man. I would be remiss if we didn't start with Orban losing. What does it mean? And why did he lose? Both of those are fascinating questions to me. And you are the man to ask that question to. What's happened? What happened?
Okay, so it is true that there was an enormous amount of interference in this election from the institutions of the European Union, the various NGOs, and but I hesitate. Well, I don't hesitate. That is the incorrect terminology. Gongos, government organized, quote, non-governmental organizations. And yeah, there was all kinds of outside pressure put on Hungary, the Kiev regime in Ukraine shutting down the Druzhba pipeline, creating an energy crisis in Hungary, which was is still highly dependent on Russian pipeline gas. Hungary doesn't have a port, right? So it's not like they can get LNG or something of the sort, even paying considerably more for it. And the European Council, the Brussels, right? You want to call them the technocrats, were putting enormous amount of pressure. They have withheld European funds, a significant amount for years, right? Which made Hungary's budget crisis harder, threatened Hungary with sanctions and the like. But ultimately, Orban has been in power for 16 years. And people want change, right? I mean, that is a truism in domestic political affairs. After a certain amount of time, there is a desire for things to improve, and it is difficult to see that from someone who has been in power for 16 years. And the opposition, Peter Magyar, he's young, he's, handsome, by those standards. He's dynamic, and he was running as a conservative, not as the opposite of Orban, but as a different type of conservative. So while it's true that there was all kinds of outside interference and pressure, the fairly convincing, if you want to call it landslide win of Magyar and his new party, TISA, is simply due to domestic politics and a desire for change, right? A belief that you need to shake up the system and they might be able to improve the economic condition. I believe that, the Euro technocrats are triumphing this as some type of victory for Hungarians choosing the European path. Well, they're already part of the EU. By what that means is falling in lockstep with Brussels, right? A shall we say, a sacrifice of sovereignty on domestic issues such as migration, but also foreign policy issues, right? Like choosing to not want to be a part of the Western proxy war on Russia in Ukraine. But I don't believe that's what the Hungarian people voted for. I think the Hungarian people voted mostly for domestic reasons, and even you should say simply, it's like when Obama was elected or when Trump was elected in the United States. There is a knee-jerk reaction for change and the idea that, well, if we just go with this other guy, we have hope that things will get better, right? Change and hope. And after 16 years in power, Orban was domestically at least past his shelf life. Now, I believe that Viktor Orban has irrevocably changed Hungarian politics and society to a significant degree. Notice that the opposition framed themselves, at least, not as a liberal, right, but as a conservative. The messaging, the social changes, the institutions that Viktor Orban put in place in Hungary in 16 years in power are not going to suddenly vanish overnight. Even if Hungary's foreign policy, with regards to several things near and dear to our hearts, like the conflict in Ukraine, might change significantly. That's ultimately what it is. People are going to try and read all kinds of foreign things into this. If the opposite had happened and Viktor Orban won, I would not be sitting here saying that Hungarians voted for Viktor Orban because they were pro-Russian. That's a nonsense mainstream media propaganda point. Viktor Orban wasn't pro-Russian, right? He was realist and sought a pragmatic, national interest-driven foreign policy course for Hungary. And his voters, when they voted for him, did the same. They didn't do that because they were pro-Russian. The same thing, this vote, people didn't vote for European technocratic power in Hungary. They voted for domestic reasons. And again, often I would like to, I don't want to completely dismiss the idea, the knee-jerk desire for change after a certain time period. But there are very few leaders in the world that past 16 years in power, can retain popular approval and attention for that long. You are muted. Muted. We can't hear you. No. Muted.
I'm sorry. Muted.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you
I was
go.
going to ask you. I'm sorry. I didn't want. There's a train that comes through. I muted.
Yeah.
I didn't want it to bleed through. Will there be a change in policy towards Russia, considering 80 to 90% of the gas?
Yeah. Oh, towards Russia. Okay, so there's a difference between a policy towards Russia in general and the conflict in Ukraine, right?
Okay.
I expect that Hungary, in fact, Peter Magyar already announced that he would have to negotiate with Russia about energy and energy delivery, energy prices, because as he said, Hungary's dependence on energy doesn't change. However, when it comes to things like approving the $90 billion loan that Viktor Orban, the European loan that Viktor Orban has held up for several months now for Ukraine to keep that regime afloat, I expect him to change his veto on that. Right, that would be the distinction. Right, do not expect a polarizing choice. Right, he's not going to come and call for the overthrow of the Russian government or anything like that. But he is going to chart a course closer to Brussels when he can on issues like aid to Ukraine. But at the same time, Hungary is energy dependent on Russia. That's not going to change overnight, and he's going to have to be pragmatic about that. I would say that one of the big things is the question of the Druzhba pipeline, because for the last several months, the Kiev regime in Ukraine has blocked the flow of gas through that pipeline to Hungary and then Slovakia and Serbia, claiming that it was hit by Russia, of course, and it was damaged beyond repair. And Viktor Orban, in fact, said yesterday that if Magyar wins, he expects that the pipeline will be turned back on the next day. Well, I don't know about the next day, but I think we're going to find within a month at least that the Kiev regime suddenly discovers that they are able to repair that pipeline, and Russian gas can once again flow across their territory to Hungary. So.
Wow. I want to move to a different topic, and I need to before going to the war, because I do want to, I guess.
Which war? There's two of them. There's at least two of them. Several more or less important ones.
Okay. Well, Iran. We have to hit the Iran negotiations, or quote unquote negotiations. Give me your take on that. I mean, for all intents and purposes, the U.S. seems to have just lost a war to Iran, with blockade being the fallback position.
That's not what Trump believes.
Yeah, he thinks the blockade is a fallback position, which is weird since it's a blockade of a blockade.
Yes.
Give me your take on this. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. So, I mean, the reality, of course, is that the U.S. has suffered a strategic defeat thus far in Iran, right? Their goal, the U.S. and Israeli goal, made quite clear multiple times, however much they might be trying to reframe it now, was regime change in Iran.
Right.
Now, the power imbalance between the two of them, much like the power balance in between Israel and Hamas, means that in order for Iran to win, all they had to do was survive. All they had to do was maintain, their own government and society in an attempt, an outside forcible attempt to change that, right? And yes, they did successfully assassinate a very large number of Iranian top officials, and I, for one, am not going to stop blaming the Iranian officials for all gathering on the first day
Right.
of the strikes together in supposedly unprotected residence of the then supreme leader, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, which was just, I don't know, a death wish. I mean, when the U.S. and Israel have a penchant, under Trump for decapitation strikes, for political assassinations. That was stupid. That's neither here nor there. But they were smart enough before that to put in orders to have multiple 4 tiers of chain of succession before them. So if they and their successor and their next successor and next successor was killed, someone would still be able to step right into that hole. And as a result of that, the chain of command, the command and control of Iran was seamless. If anything, maybe it functioned better with some of the people who were underneath stepping up to the front.
Mhm.
And despite 6 weeks of very intense bombing with standoff munitions and so forth, the U.S. was not able to pummel Iran into just capitulating and, as Trump demanded, unconditionally surrendering to the United States. And evidently, he is genuinely mystified that they didn't, right? We know they believed that all they had to do was bomb a bit, and the Iranian people would rise up and overthrow their government and all become good little American consumers, praising Trump, because that's what Trump believed. Now, not everyone within the Trump administration believed that, and J.D. Vance being one of them. Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, warning Trump beforehand that it's probably not going to work out like that. Even the head of the CIA. But he listened to evidently Witkoff and Kushner and Netanyahu and Hegseth, Warbro Hegseth, and others who were selling him that line, which is not to absolve him of responsibility for being, shall we say, tricked. I don't like that terminology. It's not a matter of a good czar and bad advisors. It is a matter of bad czar and bad advisors. That's
Right.
the situation. He believed that. He also apparently believed that Iran would not close off the Strait of Hormuz, their nuclear option, because it would all be regime change so fast. Within days, they wouldn't even have the chance to do that. And he believed that he had enough plants, the CIA had enough roots and Mossad within the Iranian system to, ensure that if they take out a few top people, that, they would have another Delcy Rodriguez willing to step in and act as a colonial puppet for Iran rather than, say, Venezuela. But obviously that's not what happened. And 6 weeks later, the U.S. is in a very bad position militarily. And Iran has responded, right? Obviously, Iran cannot respond to the U.S. directly. They can't launch their drones and missiles, can't reach American cities, right? However, they can reach American bases and the infrastructure of those Gulf Arab states who have those bases from which the attacks on Iran were launched. And they did that, very successfully. They spread out. They made the U.S. spread out their air defense, their limited air defense capabilities, not just in Israel, but in 8-9 countries across the Middle East. They also, of course, did selectively shut down the Strait of Hormuz shall we say, on the it wasn't a complete closure. It was a selective closure. They were allowing, well, first of all, their ships were going through it. And they also allowed ships of, for the Chinese and for the Pakistanis and Indians and other countries, just not for anyone linked to Israel, the United States, the Europeans, and so forth. And that alone was putting enough strain on the global energy market and thus the global economies. And basically, this type of asymmetric warfare can be boiled down to, we will make the global economy scream until you stop trying to kill us, right? Yes. And that has been an extremely successful strategy. And this is a sea change, because previously, for the last few decades, using their economy and control of the economy as a geopolitical weapon, weaponizing it and using it as a tool, a coercive tool of foreign policy, with sanctions, with their control of the global financial architecture, has been the sole remit of the once hyperpower, the United States. But in the last year, what we have seen is, first, the Chinese turn the table on the Americans with restricting rare earth and other associated critical high-tech requisite materials to the United States, which made them give up their tariff war against China, at least for the time being. And now Iran has done that by moving against the global energy markets, knowing, of course, the particular political sensitivity of the U.S. To the price of, gasoline and inflation, which in the U.S. is, driven by increases in the price of gasoline. Gasoline, the price of oil goes up, the price of gasoline in the U.S. And however much Trump might claim, oh, we don't get oil from the Middle East. Yeah, the U.S. does get very little oil from the Middle East, but it's a global market. I mean, he should know this. He supposedly is a capitalist, and he's just an overgrown, spoiled man-child, is what he is. But and an absolutely unhinged megalomaniac now, and that's not hyperbole. That is a real psychological profile of the man, I believe, at this point. But if prices go up somewhere in the world, that's going to affect the global market. And if capitalists in the U.S. can make more money diverting their oil to, South Korea or someone else that is suffering from a lack of it because of the closure of Strait of Hormuz, they will do that. Why? Because it's money. That's their primary motivation. So that's the way global markets work, and the U.S. is not exempt from that. They might have a little bit of cushion room, right? But it only goes so far. And midterm elections are coming up, and
winter's coming.
Trump's approval rating is rather low, and I'm quite sure that he is very afraid of spending the remainder of his term battling partisan impeachment launches of impeachment votes within Congress and the Senate against him.
Yes.
So he's particularly sensitive to the price of gasoline in the United States, even more so than American would be going into those midterm elections. And Iran knows that. I mean, they're well aware of this fact. So they've been using that very successfully. Also, Iranian air defense has survived, whatever Donald Trump might say. Now, obviously, they've pummeled Iran, right? They've launched thousands of standoff munitions, and they've done incredible amount of damage to the country's military, to its infrastructure, to the government, to all sorts of things. But enough of it survives that the U.S. is not willing to risk its very expensive and high-tech aircraft by flying directly over Iranian airspace. And when they take the risk and do so, we saw the results last Friday when multiple U.S. I guess it was already before that, but multiple U.S. aircraft were shot down in this apparent enriched uranium commando raid insertion that would later, in its failure, build as a pilot rescue, which, has helped lead the U.S. there. But that happened because Iranian air defense still exists at some capacity to bring those aircraft down. And part of the reason for this is that Iran, of course, has been preparing for this war for the last 40 years.
Right.
And they have built multiple underground fortress, they call them missile cities, right? Basically inside of mountains and other deep underground locations. They've got somewhere between 25 and 36 of these things, depending, on the different counts I've heard. And they're basically impenetrable, right? I mean, the biggest U.S. ground-to-earth penetrators, massive ordnance penetrators that were built specifically for Iran, can't even dent the surface of these granite mountains. And they have missile and drone construction facilities. They have missile and drone launchers. They have underground subway systems to take the munitions from one launch tube to another launch tube, one side of the mountain, another, right? And they have the capability that if the U.S. hits one of those launch, where multiple doors, sealed doors come up, the launcher comes out, shoots, pulls back in, doors close, and so forth, out of the side of the mountain. They've got many of these. Well, then the U.S. can identify and hit those tubes, right? And, cause earth slides and so forth on the surface. But Iran has the capability, after the bombing stops, 12 hours later, to just dig it out and restart things within a day or so. And they've got these to launch drones, to launch offensive missiles, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, but also for air defense. Because what Iran learned from last year is they needed to husband their air defense, right? That their mobile launchers could be found. So they're operating very differently. They're operating on an ambush basis. They don't have all their air defense spread around the country with active radar on, which identifies them to for the U.S. to identify and target them all the time. They have them hidden. A lot of these mobile launchers, even within these missile cities and elsewhere, are mostly underground around the country. And rather than using active radar, what they're relying on is a combination of cameras placed around the country whose information is all collated together with AI, and also passive infrared sensors which detect heat. Now, alone, these systems are nowhere near as effective as radar, but when they're tied together, they provide enough of detection mechanisms, and for certain things like the F-20 for stealth, they might actually be better, and they enable a detection capability without active radar, without signaling where they are, and when that detects something, Then the mobile launchers come up out of the hidey holes and suddenly turn on and let loose, and then go back down. Right? And they also have large numbers of man-portable air defense systems. Supposedly, they have their own indigenous ones. Of course, they have a deal with Russia to provide thousands of them, and now the Chinese are also talking about providing them. And manpads, the man-portable air defense systems alone, are very significant. U.S. lost one F-18 in this conflict already to a manpad. So all of that means is because they still have enough air defense capability, that the U.S. has to largely operate outside of Iranian airspace, whatever they may claim to the contrary. They're flying outside, and they're using standoff munitions for all of these most of these thousands of hits within Iran. And the standoff munitions are largely Tomahawks and JASSM's air-launched cruise missiles, which going into this conflict were already at a critically low stockpile level. Now they're past the red line level because they've used so many of these that they actually don't have enough to deal with any emerging threats. Say a new conflict with Russia or China or some other major power that has modern capability in the next few years, which is going to place serious geopolitical limitations on the U.S. And the production rate of these missiles, right? The offensive missiles, the Tomahawks and the JASSMs, the standoff munitions, but also the defensive missiles, the air defense interceptors, the Patriots, the THAADs, those production rates are all so low. For instance, the U.S. burned through 800 Tomahawks in like the first week, less than the first week of the attack on Iran. Meanwhile, they were planning on making something like 52 of them this year.
Right.
You can see the disparity. This is not sustainable. So as long as Iran can keep them having to use standoff munitions by retaining at least an ambush air defense capacity, then the U.S. has to waste these low stockpile critical standoff munitions. If they could move inside Iranian airspace, let's say all of Iranian air defense was wiped out, then they could switch from standoff munitions to something that they have a lot more, like JDAMs, which are old, dumb gravity bombs with a guide kit, like Russia's FABs, right? And when Trump was talking about the U.S. has an inexhaustible supply of weapons, what he was talking about was these, right? And just all dumb gravity bombs themselves. I mean, they're right. I mean, the U.S. had so many of those left over from the Cold War. Yeah, it's practically inexhaustible. So it's very important that Iran has largely kept some air defense capacity. This is extremely frustrated the United States. Also, they discovered that they had no capability to force open the Strait of Hormuz.
There's that.
Because, I mean, first of all, there is the threat of sea mines, although to my knowledge, there's been no ship that has been destroyed because of sea mines. Iran has the capability to completely mine the Strait of Hormuz. They have not done that, right? Because they wanted certain traffic to get through. But what they've closed it with is selective attacks and what is being called an insurance blockade. Because they don't need to hit every ship or put all their navy in a big line blocking. All they need to use what assets they have, like aerial drones, like surface drones, like submersible drones, like submarines. They have a handful of submarines designed for operating, small submarines, specifically for operating in the conditions of the Strait of Hormuz. Anti-ship cruise missiles, even artillery under certain conditions. They have lots of different assets. All they have to do is hit an occasional tanker or a cargo ship, right? And then suddenly that's it. They're all going to stop because again, we live in a capitalist world, and no owner of those ships wants to risk losing a ship, right, to that. And also the insurance providers immediately jack up all the rates, absolutely, or just forbid insurance for ships because they don't want to pay out for a oil tanker or a fertilizer cargo ship hit by an Iranian drone, right? All they need to do is launch a few demonstrative attacks, which they did, and that's it. No one's going to risk it. No matter Trump yelling that the tanker captains were cowards and they needed to just do what the U.S. Navy was unwilling to do and just drive into the Strait of Hormuz.
Right. It's like, screw it, just risk it. Just risk it.
Yeah. So the U.S. had to do something. They had to change the status quo because the damage to the global economy, right? Oil, liquefied natural gas, because Qatar was a big producer, fertilizer, urea fertilizer, which is a byproduct of the LNG, helium, right? Aluminum, all these things were becoming a critical shortage throughout the world. And Trump needs to change that. He needs to open the Strait of Hormuz. And there's only two ways to do that. Either to give in to the Iranian demands, which he, of course, is politically unable to do. He can't admit he lost this, right? I counted at least 10 social media posts attacking news outlets in the U.S. for being fake news because they dared suggest that the U.S. wasn't winning or wasn't winning handily or that Iran had any capability of anything left, right? How dare you say I don't have clothes? Don't you see what beautiful clothes I, the God Emperor of mankind, am wearing? I could wipe out Iranian civilization tomorrow if I wanted to. And they do that. But instead, he begged Iran for several weeks for ceasefires. And Iran eventually gave in to agreeing to a ceasefire while negotiating a 2-week ceasefire for negotiation talks. And we're told, I can't, we're told that Chinese pressure was a major factor in this. And they do have major leverage over Iran because Iran exports 90% of its oil to China, and for many other reasons. But China evidently is extremely afraid that if it gets much worse, and Iran does have plenty of escalatory steps, like having the Houthis close the Bab al-Mandab Straits across the Red Sea, that would, seriously send us immediately into global depression level energy crisis. And the Chinese don't want that. The Chinese do not want a global depression resulting from this. So the Chinese told the Iranians to sit down and talk to the Americans. The Americans were still operating apparently under the delusional belief that they had pummeled Iran enough that if they sat down in a room with them, they could get them to agree to something more like their idea of, them having won this, right? And that Iran should just surrender and let Trump pick the next supreme leader and all of the other insane things that he said. But they're not. They're not at all. They feel very comfortable, actually. And if anything, again, it was China that might have pushed them to sit down at the table. And now Trump, what he was doing militarily was not working. He's running out of time, and he can't give in to Iran's political demands. So now they've come up with this absolutely cockamamie scheme of blockading a blockade, effectively. Originally, they said they were going to block all traffic moving through the Strait of Hormuz. That has since changed. That was the initial. Now they're talking just blocking all traffic in and out of Iranian ports. And there's a big distinction there. He's also claimed that they will attack any ship that pays Iran's toll fee for moving through the Strait of Hormuz, which of course is a big thing. But here's the thing. To do any of this, they're going to have to move their naval assets close enough to the Strait of Hormuz to act on any ships coming in and out of Iranian ports, which they couldn't do in the first place to open up the Strait of Hormuz, because Iran has too many of those same capabilities that we talked about for closing the Strait of Hormuz that can be used on U.S. Navy ships. And by the way, whatever the U.S. may claim, they have absolutely jack all in the way of real minesweeper capability. They got rid of all their minesweepers a few years ago because the littoral combat ships were supposed to pick up that duty. And it turns out the littoral combat ships are as feces at that as they are at everything else. They're already talking now, launching limited airstrikes again, right? Because they realize that they're going to be sending their Navy, the U.S. Navy, into a chicken shoot. And despite Trump's claim, that the British are going to help and NATO's going to help, they're all like, no, we're still not going.
They're saying no. Stormer came out and said no.
But
Mark,
said no. Australia said no. It's they're flailing. They do not know what to do at this point. And a desperate, scared, unhinged megalomaniac like the U.S. in a situation like this is extremely dangerous, not only for Iran and the global economy, but the entire world. The Guardian put out a point yesterday that people in the U.S., political figures, previous administrations, and so forth, are really starting to worry that either Israel or the United States is so desperate and so frustrated that they're not very far from using nuclear weapons to try to force Iran to a defeat that they have not been able to achieve conventionally.
Mark, we're going to have to end it on that. Fantastic breakdown. As always, fantastic breakdown. Mark Labota, International Relations Security Analyst. You can find Mark on Boosty under Real Politics with Mark Labota. Mark, you've been missed, man. Thank you for this. You be safe. Okay?
I've missed being here, and you've been missed, Jamal. So welcome back.
Thank you for that, man. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. You have a good day, man. Be safe.
Cheers.
All right. And I am going to read this, and we're going to close because I have to get to Ted's show, deprogram. You can join me on that. I'm always made. Oh, that's not it. This one. Unrelated to discussion, have you seen the reporting for Sale and Medium Group on American transparency? Interested in your thoughts and perspective, especially since Sputnik and RT was shut down. Oh, I haven't seen that one. I have to look into it. I would answer this on the next one because I have to close it. You all be safe, be kind. Jamal Thomas Morning Show signing off. I will see you bright and early tomorrow morning. Check me out on Ted Rawls' show, Deprogrammed, where I am also co-hosting. Be safe, be kind, love, peace, soul. See you in a few. Have a good one all.